Surya McEwen, thanks for joining me on Full Story.
Hello, Nour. Thanks for having me.
You are now back home in Australia after spending several days in Israeli detention alongside other humanitarians and activists. How are you feeling physically? How are you feeling mentally?
I feel good. Feels good to return to family and friends and to the community here. I just arrived just before connecting with you back in my hometown, and so I look forward to having some rest and getting back to my work here.
I want to talk about what it was like being on the flotilla, sailing towards Gaza, and then being intercepted by armed Israeli naval commandos. But before we do, I want to ask you about what motivated you to put your hand up for this mission, not once, but twice.
Three times actually. A situation that's happening in the world where millions of people are being starved to death is such a stain on the collective conscience of humanity, and it feels like people who have some political awareness or have some connection to the struggle of those people have a duty to do whatever is possible to affect the situation. And so being having the opportunity to be able to take food and medical aid to people who are being quite literally starved to death and all these horrific experiences, it felt like something that I had no choice but to be involved in.
Mm. Do you recall when or what first brought to your attention the plight of the Palestinians, the nature of the occupation in Palestine?
I have a background in international relations, but I also think I was an avid reader as a child. I think I was in early high school. I remember being around 13 or 14 and reading an article by Dr. Ramzi Baroud, an amazing Palestinian author, about some of his personal experiences growing up. I believe it was an early version of a chapter that ended up being in a book that he wrote called My Father Was a Freedom Fighter, which was about his family's experience of the Nakba and being pushed off their land and ending up as refugees, which is the story of so many Palestinians who are fighting for the right of return, who still have the keys sometimes and the deeds to their land, but have been forced out of their traditional homelands for almost 80 years now. The example of Palestinian samud, like samud is a word that's often translated as like resilience or steadfastness or something, but it's a word it's about a collectivity, a capacity for collective struggle of creating community in the face of this overwhelming oppression over generations, and this commitment to maintain dignity in the struggle against it, and to maintain this commitment towards a freedom against overwhelming odds. And whatever struggle there is in the world, whatever ups and downs individuals are going through in their personal lives or in their collective lives and communities, the example of Palestinian Samud is like an invitation for every single human in the world. It is the most beautiful, the most the most beautiful expression of humanity. Like I didn't realize how much more I had to learn about what it meant to be human until I went to Palestine.
Mm. Now, Soraya, you would know that in 2010, a number of Turkish activists were killed by Israeli commandos on board a similar flotilla bound for Gaza. Were you prepared for an outcome like that? Talk me through the preparation and what was going through your mind as you embarked on this mission.
Anybody who's involved in the flotilla missions understands the risks and has a sense of the danger and the possibilities that could occur. We do extensive training, we do extensive nonviolence training, but then also deal with different contingencies that could occur. There's been now 39 flotilla missions since 2007, 2008, when Israel enforced a brutal blockade. Essentially, Gaza since then has been like a concentration camp. There's no control over any borders, over the ocean, over the sea. Israel has a policy of deliberately limiting the amount of calories that are allowed into Gaza to ensure the population is undernourished. And they have a policy that they call mowing the lawn, basically just bombing civilian areas to smithereens every few years to destabilize the population and make it really hard for people to live with dignity and to live in peace and to feel like that there's hope. So since that time, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition has been doing missions over and over again, and that inspired the Global Samud Flotilla to do this one. it's similar to past missions in lots of ways, but the aim of taking as many boats as we possibly could to make it more likely that we could break the siege and open up a humanitarian corridor, break into the concentration camp, and create a connection with the rest of the world felt necessary given the extent of the horror. And it was a beautiful thing to be a part of, despite those risks, because of the historic duty of the moment.
Mm. Okay, so you were heading towards Gaza, which is under a land, sea, and air blockade by the Israelis. Take me back to that night. You're on the Mia, I believe was the name of the vessel that you were on. You're heading towards Gaza with 40 other vessels with people from around the world. Describe what that was like for you, and what was the mood on board the flotilla?
So yeah, we had about 500 participants on. By that point, I think we were down to 43, 44 vessels.
This is the Israeli Navy. You are approaching a blockaded zone.
There were 40 military vessels coming from all different directions. Some of them were massive Navy vessels. Some of them were mid-sized, like large vessels, but not the huge, like stadium-sized ones. And then there were other smaller ones with ribs that would have the commandos who would come and intercept the vessels.
You are instructed to change your course. Any further attempts to sail toward Gaza endangers your safety and places you within an active war zone. If you continue on your route and attempt to breach the naval blockade, we will stop your vessel and act to confiscate it through legal proceedings in court.
It took them a long time. It took them like 8 to 9 hours to intercept all of the vessels. And so it was a night of like ducking and weaving, sailing around, like avoiding the military vessels. They were using water cannons and smoke bombs and different military tactics to try to stop us.
Kimyasal fışkırtıyor gemiye. Bak 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 bak. Kimyasal fışkırtıyor gemiye.
Firing a very, very bright light at us, and they're firing water.
Try to intimidate us. I was on the boat that got, I believe the closest, we were around 26 nautical miles from the shore of Gaza, and I was speaking to friends in Gaza who were on the shore waiting for us. We were so sure that we would make it as well at that point. Like they operate in the dark usually. They don't like their operations to be filmed. And we got to sunrise and we're getting quite close. And then eventually we were stopped as well and boarded and taken hostage.
Hands up, everybody. Can you put your fucking hands up, please?
Hey, phones on the water, please. Phones on the water.
And forced back to what they call Israel and imprisoned there against our will.
Once they boarded the vessel that you were on, what happened?
When they boarded our ship, they used Shayatet 13, which is like the elite naval commandos who are very well trained. I mean, they're ruthless. They're also responsible for massacres in Al Shifa Hospital, lots of places where mass graves are being found. They were people who were murdered by Shayatet 13, but they're clearly well trained. They're not going to act erratically. And once it was clear that we were no threat, that we were peaceful humanitarians, that we just had aid on board, it was a pretty straightforward process for them to take control of the ships and then take us back to the port that they call Ashdod port.
And then what happened there?
When we arrived there, the border police there were clearly directed to do a show of force against us. And so there were many hundreds of border police for our boat. Like when I got off our boat, there was about 30 border police with automatic weapons, some media, and they were trying to scare us and intimidate us. And it was part of their hasbara, their like deception or propaganda to kind of get footage of us being treated badly and deter people from doing humanitarian missions like this.
There have been reports since the 6 Australians who were detained have returned of physical violence, of threats, of degrading treatment. Can you talk to me about your own experience and what you witnessed?
Yeah, I want to preface that in the context of what happens for Palestinian prisoners. We were taken to Kitsyot prison, which is a place in the Naqab desert, Palestinian desert, that is famous for Palestinians being tortured to death and just the most brutal, grotesque human rights violations. it was so bad that it was shut down for a number of years, and then it's been reopened again, and it's become even worse in the last 2 years since the genocide has escalated. So just to put in context the experiences that we had, being a very light version of what happens to people who are typically imprisoned in that place, with the privilege of Western passports often, and with the eyes of the world on Israel, watching them in a way that sadly does not happen for Palestinians who experience this every single day, often who are there without any charges, without any crime committed, just on administrative detention, stolen from their families in the night and never returning. When I was taken from the Mia Mia, I was raised Hindu, so I was wearing a mala, like Rudraks beads, and they ripped them off and threw them on the ground and stomped on them and made a show of like spitting on them, like to try to humiliate me. I was grabbed by about 5 men and forced like face first into the asphalt, and 2 men stood on my back and like grabbed both of my arms, trying to twist them back, and my left arm was pulled out of the socket partly. I was being kicked and punched on both sides as I was being dragged from the edge of the pier um, to a place where they eventually had us all lined up. And I have a broken rib and a cracked rib on my left side from being punched and kicked while being dragged. Then we were all put into stress positions. Some people were just sitting with their heads down, and then some people I was told to sit on my, to kneel down on my knees and have my face to the ground so I wasn't looking up. And if you move your head just slightly off the ground, you can feel like the metal of the automatic weapon at the back of your head. They're calling me all sorts of names. I'm a terrorist. They're going to kill me. Insulting me for being Hindu, but then likening me to Muslim terrorists as well. Like their racial vilification was very confused. I was in that position for almost 2 hours. Like for a little while, you're trying to wiggle your toes and keep your blood flowing, and then eventually, after about an hour, you lose. I lost all feeling in my legs. I kind of slumped over. I thought by then I'd be able to rearrange, so I kind of lifted to rearrange, and then feel the gun at the back of my head again. And the insults carrying on. Um, then I was dragged to a place for processing. They ripped up my passport, and I asked, like, how am I supposed to travel, like, with this passport? And they said, complain to the UN. And that was kind of it. Like, I never understood why they ripped up my passport. That was like a unique thing that didn't happen to a lot of people. We were strip searched and then kind of told we were being taken away and that we wouldn't return, we wouldn't see our families. After processing, I was forced down like a dark alleyway, which I found out later is like between the processing center and the military transport vehicles where they take us to Ketziot. And 2 men like were searching my body, and I took my shirt off and my pants off, and then they were kind of signaling to my underwear, and I was kind of like, we've done this already. And one of them put his handgun to my temple, and the other one like made me completely naked and was like grabbing my genitals and like playing with them and like laughing. And one of them was kind of looking very serious, like he was going to kill me, and the other one was trying to humiliate me.
How did you feel?
On one level, you have a certain expectation of abuse, and you also, I've been in Palestine before, I've been detained before, and I understand the way that the IOF operates, the dehumanization of especially Muslim bodies, especially Palestinian bodies, but also Black and brown bodies in general, and just people who have solidarity with Palestinians. I expected a certain amount of like degrading treatment or trying to create fear. I suspected that they didn't have permission to kill me or to like seriously harm me, so there was some safety, I guess, in that. But also just knowing once you're involved in struggle like this, you're aware of what happens to Palestinians in that same scenario. Like, there is a consistent pattern of the IOF like raping Palestinians to death. It's like unbelievably horrific what happens to Palestinians. So, experiencing a little bit of humiliation in the context of trying to do a mission like this, like I was contextualizing it that way, which helped, I think.
Mm.
After that, after maybe 5 minutes of that, I was like handcuffed and then dragged to the place where they put you on the bus. Had my shoes cut off, so I didn't have shoes, and all my things taken. I was asking about my passport, but they had my passport, even though it was ripped up. And then they just like threw me into this military transport vehicle, which is like a metal vehicle. And it was fine for me because I'm a young person. I can hold on in a certain way. You know, I had the sore ribs. It's not like I was holding on with my right arm, but they like speed up really fast and they try to slow down quickly, brake quickly to make people like fall around and bang their heads in the back of this transport. We had like 18 people in the back of this transport vehicle, and some of the old men like got pretty severe cuts and bruises and stuff from that. When we arrived at Kitsyot, we were about 100 of us were crammed into this cage, like an outside cage cell, designed probably for about 20 people. And Ben Gavir came, who's one of the far right leaders in Israel, came and like was calling us terrorists and was doing a media moment. It was clearly like a media moment. He's actually a convicted terrorist within Israeli law, which is just, the irony is so deep. And then we were imprisoned in Ketziot.
I've mentioned it now just a couple of times, Soraya. Human rights organisations, Palestinian organisations like Al-Damir, Israeli organisations like B'Tselem, the UN, they've all, over recent months, indeed years, have documented systemic abuse and torture, including gender-based violence against Palestinians. You're talking now about your arrival to a prison in the middle of the desert, I believe. What happens there?
I mean, as you say, for Palestinians, what happens there is grotesque amounts of torture and human rights abuses just constantly. The amount of Palestinian people who have been tortured to death there is there's allegations, and then there's the extent to which the IOF and the Israeli authorities try to keep media and keep information from places like that. So there's a huge amount of people who have disappeared in that prison and never returned, often who have never committed crimes or been charged with anything. The place that we were taken within Kitsyot was clearly cleared out just for us. Like they had planned bringing us there. It was a lot of us, so it kind of makes sense they would have an operation oriented just towards dealing with us as prisoners. We could hear Palestinians screaming in the distance, like we could hear what felt like torture happening in real time, but we were clearly, we were in 3 pavilions, like 3 cell blocks, 2 for the men and 1 for the women, that it felt like was quite separate from the rest of the prison. It's a huge prison complex. And they obviously had us in our own little section. I and many others were on hunger strike, so we weren't receiving food. They didn't offer us any water the whole time that we were there. There was a dirty little toilet tap next to the toilet that had clearly like bleach and chemicals, and it's brown water, like was yucky water, but that's what we had to drink. And they were using sleep deprivation techniques. So every half an hour or so, there would be like really loud yelling in Hebrew over the loudspeakers, which are extremely loud, or there would be heavy machinery just on the other side of the wall operating all night as though they're doing some construction works or something. But then later you see down that alleyway and nothing's been done. It's just like they have them on for the noise, moving things around for no purpose but to keep us awake. They have tactical response units, so basically a bunch of soldiers with guns, and they come and put them in your face and bring dogs in. Some people were taken, my close friend was taken with a hood over his head into the desert. They dug a grave for him and put him in it, and had guns to his head and were saying they're going to kill him and then find his little daughter and kill his daughter. And that's just some horrible, they're just clearly trying to just bring as much fear to us as they possibly could over the 7 days that some of us were in prison there. Also, two elderly men who desperately needed insulin, Paddy from Ireland and our brother Ahmed from Algeria, and they refused to give the medicine. It was like a life or death situation, so we kind of like rioted, like we didn't cooperate with them. We were demanding medicine for these two men for about a day and a half until they finally gave them the medical care that likely stopped them from credible danger. They also just did humiliating things, like they pissed on the mattress that they gave me to sleep on, so I'd have to sleep on the floor. All sorts of like degrading treatment. But as I say, like I'm a significantly lighter version of that for us than is experienced by everybody else who ends up taken hostage in that particular prison.
I want to ask you about the level of support that you received from the Australian government, from DFAT officials while you were in Israeli detention. There has been criticism of the Australian government. What kind of support did you get? What more would you have liked?
I mean, to begin, before detention, I was on a boat called Luna Bark before I ended up on Mia Mia. And we were in the European Economic Zone in the Mediterranean, just south of Greece. And we experienced a drone attack by Israel. 10 of our boats were hit with explosives. I had a bomb go off about 1.5 meters above my head. They blew a huge hole in our sail and eventually like decommissioned the boat. We couldn't carry on with the Luna Bark. We were humanitarians on a civilian mission to take aid to the Holocaust of our times. And instead of responding with care or trying to check that we were okay or find some way to support us and our safety, our government didn't criticize Israel. They basically said that, it's our fault for being in a dangerous area. We were very much not in a dangerous area. We were in the Mediterranean, south of Greece, and we were bombed by a foreign nation. And then even when we got closer to Gaza, the reason that we were getting closer to a dangerous area is because our government and many of the governments in the world are co-signing the Holocaust of the people right now. It is so grotesque. And yeah, we weren't supported at all. There's a certain amount of consular support if you have an embassy, if you have consular support in a country. Like 3 days, I think, after being in prison, we had 2 consular officers come and visit us who were lovely, like the human beings were lovely people. They were trying to support us. But the government obviously wasn't allowing them to support us in any meaningful way. There was also six of us with Australian citizenship, and there's 2 of them. We have 10 minutes to speak, and so nothing meaningful could really happen.
Mm.
I told them about my passport being ripped up, and they said they'd try to get a new one so I could travel, but that wasn't possible. Then in Jordan, when we were finally deported across the border into Jordan, we were like forced to go to hospital. We had to pay for it ourselves. We were all in debt, and then they buy our tickets home, like our plane tickets, but we have to pay it back. But like I found like a Skyscanner ticket for like $900 to get back that I could actually afford, and they wouldn't let us choose our own tickets. So they forced me to buy like a $4,500 ticket that I have to pay back within a month. I don't know, maybe encourage people not to expect support from our consular services. I'm not sure what it's about entirely, but they weren't helpful for us at all.
Mm.
They also didn't do anything about my ripped passport. They assured me that they'd speak to the border control in Jordan and in Dubai, which is one of the places on the way back. And because they clearly didn't do that, I ended up being interrogated by secret services in both countries, spent all this time in like dark rooms in the airports, treated like some hostile enemy or something because our consular assistants didn't give me a new passport or like provide a safe pathway home, even though they bought the tickets. It was very disappointing. As an Australian citizen, I don't feel supported whatsoever by the government.
Mm. What do you say to Australians and others who express that view that you just spoke of, that they criticise or resent the flotilla's mission? Some suggest that you're inviting harm your own way. Others say that the mission won't change anything on the ground. What do you say to those kind of attitudes?
I mean, it depends which one. For people who don't, so like a lot of people will say you can't do anything. But history is being made by people while other people are saying it can't be made, nothing can happen. We live in this very naive, sad, individualistic culture. Like you just can't do anything. There's no hope. Like it's naive to try to do anything meaningful whatsoever. And of course, some people will feel that way, and then other people will do things and will transform the world because they're involved in things like mass actions like this. I often hear a refrain from Australians, and sometimes it's obviously just they have a different politics, and so they're using it as propaganda or something. But a lot of people genuinely feel like, why is all this energy being put into this thing that's happening all the way over there? And they just totally misunderstand the fundamental dynamic for Palestinian solidarity movements. Like, we agree with you. Australia is in a situation where we give so much money to these organizations whose fundamental purpose is to support the aims and the goals of a foreign country, and almost exclusively against the interest of our country here. We spend like hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars supporting organizations that are here to support Israel against our own wishes. And we prop up this state that's committing a Holocaust that is terrible for our image in the world. Let's separate ourselves so that the possibility of peace and equality and justice for all people who live in historic Palestine becomes possible in the future. So I agree with some of those people, but it feels like they have a slanted view of the reality.
Mm. There is now a ceasefire, a tenuous one though. Where will you channel your energy? What would you like to see other people do now that there is a ceasefire in place?
We have to do what we have been doing, but more of it. We have to keep pushing until that happens, until there's a moment when Palestinians who still own their houses but haven't been able to return are allowed to return, until there's a moment when there is a possibility for one democratic state where everybody has the right to vote, everyone has equality, everyone has a right to life and dignity and peace, no matter if they're Jewish or they're Muslim or they're Christian, or whatever their background is. Everyone deserves to have equality, actual equality there. And if we have this impression they're trying to give us, which is like the work is done now, it's all over, then they will preserve this genocidal state that has this project to keep killing Palestinians and keep killing their land. And unless we fight for it, it's not going to happen.
Surya McEwen, thank you so much for your time.
It's an honor to be here speaking with you, be on your show.
That was Surya McEwen. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has previously said that it raised the treatment and welfare of Australians detained in Israel with Israeli officials in Tel Aviv and Canberra. Prior to the flotilla's interception, Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Matt Thistlethwaite, said in a statement that Australia called on all parties to respect international law and to refrain from any unlawful or violent act against the flotilla. You can read more about the Samud flotilla on theguardian.com, and we've linked to some pieces about the treatment of Palestinians in Israeli prisons on the full story page. That's it for today. This episode was produced by me, Nour Haydar, and Karishma Luthria. Sound design and mixing by Daniel Simo. The executive producer is Hannah Parks. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe or follow Full Story wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also leave us a review. I'm Nour Haydar. Thanks for listening.